How do you do? Dr. Durant feels it'd be a little unkind to present this episode without a friendly word of warning. So here I am, boys and ghouls. It's one of the strangest tales ever told, and I had a hand in it. It deals with two of the greatest fiends ever to grace the silver screen, Dracula and Frankenstein. I think it'll thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So, if you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to, well, we warned you. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sanctum. Well, I see you've decided to ignore Uncle Forey's warning and have tuned in anyway. Good, because tonight, as Uncle Forey said, we're going to be taking a look at two of the titans of terror, Dracula and Frankenstein. And we'll also be taking a look at some cool retro toy collectibles from Monster General Store, the new endeavor from Brent Sorensen of Brent's Dolls, and actor and monster kid made good, Dan Roebuck. Now, I must warn you, we're not going to be talking about the Dracula played by Bela Lugosi or the Frankenstein played by Boris Karloff. No, we're going to be taking a look at the team of Vorkov and Bloom, and for a brief moment at the end of the picture, Shelley Weiss. Who are they, you say? Well, hook that drive-in speaker up to your car window, and I will regale you with a tale of one of the most terrifying pictures ever set to celluloid. New, different, shocking. The kings of horror battle to the death. Together in one film, they meet in a fight of fright. All new, all color. The most shocking horror show of the year. Love tramps, seduced by creatures from the grave. A new 1930s thriller. In color. The original horror stars. The original Frankenstein lab. The creepy old music. Count Dracula, the Frankenstein monster, the Doctor of Doom, the mad zombie. As long as you live, you will never see a film as shocking as this one. The giants of screen terror clash in a battle to the death. Don't say you weren't warned. I did warn them. At the beginning of your episode, in the little stop-motion animation bit. Wasn't really animated, I sort of just waved my arms around like a lunatic. Shh, Forey, please. Oh, for God's sakes, get on with it, you big ham. Even I wasn't this bad. Yes, it was a real monster mash when they clash. The Adamson cult classic, Drive In Dracula meets Baked Potato Frankenstein. I mean, Dracula versus Frankenstein. Now, while you all take a break from that wave of hyperbole, let's take a look at this Forrest J. Ackerman figure here from the beginning of the episode. Now, this figure sadly came out after I did my Famous Monsters episode, but I did want to showcase it here, and I figured this episode would be perfect for it, because Forrest J. Ackerman was involved in Al Adamson's Dracula vs. Frankenstein. Very cool figure. It's done by Pallbearer Press, which is an arm of Martin Cage's Distinctive Dummies, I believe. Great box with the Famous Monsters fan club pin, 1/9 scale collectible figure. And here we've got the credits on the side. Painted by Martin Cage, head sculpt by Pablo Valenzuela, panel illustration by Craig Holloway, layout and design by Merritt. Special thanks to Eben McGar, Corey Taylor, handmade in Horrorwood, California, by Distinctive Dummies for Pallbearer Press. Forrest J. Ackerman, 1916 to 2008. Sci-fi was my high. There's that cool Famous Monsters of Filmland logo. Nice portrait of Forey on the back here. Beautiful painting there he is with his cane and his limited edition 98 of 100. Now, it really does capture the essence of Forrest J. Ackerman in his prime. He's got his great Vincent Price mustache there. His huge glasses, which are removable. So we can see Look at that paint job. That sculpt and that paint job is incredible. I mean, I tout this every time that I showcase custom action figures, be it from Brent's Dolls, Alexander Heftick, or Martin Cage. They really are works of art. And there are so many guys out there that are just making terrific action figures. And what a great way to honor Forrest J. Ackerman. And I love the clothes. I love the design, the color shirt they chose, and the jacket, because it sort of gives Forey that kind of older gentleman appeal, the mid-century modern style to a certain degree. And then another really cool thing here with this is on his hand. See if I can get this into focus. On his hand, he has the Count Dracula ring that he owned. Great hand sculpt, too. And, I mean, even solid shoes. And the figure itself, it's a really solid figure. It's not like an old FTC body or an old Mego body or anything like that. It's a solid figure. And one of the other props here is the cane from the Wolfman, the Wolf's Head pentagram cane from the Lon Chaney film, The Wolfman. Now I am, of course, thrilled to have this Uncle Forey figure take a place of honor in my collection. And I think I'll display him with all of the figures that I showcased in that famous monster episode. Now, growing up as a monster kid in the 1970s, I could often be found planted right in front of my television set every Saturday afternoon watching Creature Double Feature on TV 56. And some of my favorite movies they would show would be the classic Universal monster pictures. Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Mummy, Dracula. I loved them all. And though Frankenstein met the Wolfman and then all of them got together, sans the Mummy, in House of Dracula and House of Frankenstein, Dracula and Frankenstein never fought in any of those old movies. The closest they came to having a fight was in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, but it never actually happened. So imagine one day I'm poring over old issues of Famous Monsters of Filmland and old horror books, and I find out about this film called Dracula Vs Frankenstein. And this film became an obsession of mine. I had to see it. I thought it was one of the Universal monster movies that I missed. And then one day, there's an ad in the TV guide for an upcoming Creature Double Feature. And it's going to be a Frankenstein double feature. Dracula vs. Frankenstein and Frankenstein Conquers the World. Now, I had seen Frankenstein Conquers the World plenty. And I knew that wasn't really a Frankenstein movie. But I still loved it. But here it was. My holy grail of movies to see. Dracula vs. Frankenstein. Did I see it? No, because my dad made me go out and run errands with him. Now, it wouldn't be till years later that I would finally get to see the film on VHS and right the wrong that my father had done to me. And when I finally sat down and watched this film, I was dumbfounded. And yet, I couldn't look away. The film managed to exploit my fascination with all things Frankenstein, and at the same time cement my fear and phobia of curly-haired men. Now, Dracula vs. Frankenstein is the work of Al Adamson and Sam Sherman. Al Adamson was a director who made mainly B-grade horror and exploitation flicks, drive-in fare, and he covered just about every genre you could think of. Westerns, biker films, softcore porn, horror, martial arts, and even sci-fi. And Sam Sherman was usually by his side producing. And together these two were the backbone of independent international films. Now, the film wasn't even originally a Dracula vs. Frankenstein movie. It was initially a film called Satan's Blood Freaks, a sort of violent biker flick, and then they called it The Bloodseekers. It had horror tropes, but it was more of a modern horror movie. But upon release, the film did so poorly that Sherman reeled it back in and tried to figure out a way to salvage it. And his decision was to add Dracula and Frankenstein. Now, a little background on both men here. Adamson was the son of a silent movie star, and Sam Sherman had worked for Famous Monsters magazine as a teenager. He wrote articles for FM as well as Screen Thrills Illustrated for Warren Publications. So both men had a love and appreciation for old school Hollywood. And when you get your old school Universal style horror movie mixed in with your graphically violent hippies and bikers and people on LSD, well, let's just say they're two great tastes that taste great together. Now, the way they weave these two stories together is both amazing and insane. The plot is almost indescribable, but I'll try. Dr. Durant, who's also Dr. Frankenstein, is holed up in a secret lab inside a haunted house exhibit on a seedy California boardwalk. Now, this is where everything gets jumbled together. Dr. Durant/Dr. Frankenstein is trying to create this blood serum. Now, this blood serum is so powerful, it will cure Dr. Frankenstein, his mute manservant Groton, and it will even help Dracula go out into the sun again. And that is, of course, why Dracula shows up. Yes, Dracula shows up with the Frankenstein monster in tow. Dracula tells Dr. Frankenstein that he'll help him revive the Frankenstein monster in exchange for some of the serum. Throw in a Vegas showgirl looking for her missing sister, a grizzled cop who's seen it all, an aging hippie in a mustard yellow turtleneck and a puka necklace, and a biker who likes to slip people LSD Mickeys, and you've got a film that defines the term psychotronic. And what a cast. You've got classical monster actors, you've got Adamson's stable of regular performers, and you've got a bunch of new faces as well. J. Carrol Naish plays Dr. Frankenstein/Dr. Durant. Naish starred in one of the original Frankenstein pictures, House of Frankenstein, playing Daniel, Boris Karloff's hunchbacked assistant. Lon Chaney Jr., who created the role of the Wolfman, plays Groton, Naish's mute assistant. Chaney, of course, has the distinction of having played every one of the original Universal monsters. Angelo Rosito stars as the dwarf carnival barker Grasbo, who lures unwary hippies into Dr. Frankenstein's creature emporium. Grasbo, Groton, and Frankenstein. Those are my attorneys. Jody, I made a funny. Write it down in the book. Rosito, of course, starred in the classic horror film Freaks, and would later go on to be the master half of the Master Blaster character in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Regina Carroll stars as Judith Fontaine, the Vegas showgirl who's looking for her missing sister on the boardwalk. Now, Carroll was, of course, Adamson's wife and starred in the majority of his pictures. But, interesting fact, Carroll was originally from Boston, Massachusetts, giving Dracula and Frankenstein that New England vibe. Russ Tamblyn is Rico, the biker, the guy that likes to slip everybody an LSD Mickey. Now, Russ Tamblyn, according to a friend of mine, was in a great movie called West Side Story. I don't really know what that is, but my friend can't stop talking about it. I know Russ Tamblyn from a better film, a bigger film, one of my favorite films, War of the Gargantuas. And, of course, we cannot forget dear old Uncle Forey, Forrest J. Ackerman, with his amazing cameo as the vile Dr. Beaumont. Now let's get to those fresh new faces, the stars of the film, Dracula and Frankenstein. Now, initially, John Carradine had been slated to play the role of Dracula. However, Sam Sherman didn't want to pay what he thought were Carradine's high fees, so he went to the next best person, his financial advisor, Roger Engel. Who is Roger Engel, you say? Why, that is the man who would come to be known as Zandor Vorkov. And what a great moniker that is. And of course, there is only one person in the world who could come up with a name like that. Forrest J. Ackerman. Of course, Forey heard that Roger Engel was going to play Dracula and said, that's no name for a horror movie actor. And so he whipped this name up. Now Forey got the name Zandor from the head of the Church of Satan, Anton Zandor LaVey. And then he went with Vorkov because it sounded like Karloff. Also making his debut in this film is John Bloom as the Frankenstein monster. Now, Bloom plays the monster throughout the majority of the film. However, he isn't the monster when Dracula actually fights Frankenstein. Sherman and Adamson reshot the ending in upstate New York, and Bloom wasn't anywhere near there at the time. So, Roger Engel, or Vorkov, reached out to his old manager at a record store he worked at, Shelley Weiss, and he plays the Frankenstein monster for the climax of the film. Now, of course, here is the real reason that I wanted to talk about Dracula vs. Frankenstein, so I could showcase these two amazing figures from Monster General Store. The Monster General Store is a new endeavor between Brent Sorensen of Brent's Dolls, the actor Dan Roebuck, and marketer and artist Peter Bregman. And they have started releasing some really cool custom action figures. Now, these aren't just any custom figures. These are officially licensed through Independent International Pictures, making this the first piece of official Dracula vs. Frankenstein merch. And it's clear from looking at this product here in front of us that these three have an appreciation of classic monsters and classic monster toys. Let's take a look at Zandor Vorkov first. Now, of course, what I love about this is the packaging, because it evokes those monsters that I love so well, the AHI monsters. You've got right here Monster General Store Super Monsters. You've got that Pepto-Bismol pink card, Dracula. There he is in the card bubble. And what you've got is these other figures that are available, but these are done sort of in the Maniac style art of the old Monster Kid Iron-On transfers. And there's Dan Roebuck's horror movie host character, Dr. Shocker. You've got Dracula there. You've got Igor, who is a character that also appears in Dr. Shocker's videos. Frankenstein. We've got the Monster General Store logo. And you know what? I'm going to take the card out of the clamshell so that I don't have to deal with this reflection and lights. So here's a better look at the card art now. Like I said, it's that AHI style. We've got the Monster Castle up there. The Monster General Store, Super Monsters, Dracula. The Maniac artwork, Dr. Shocker. Igor, Dracula vs. Frankenstein. And then we've got 8-inch custom-made action figure. No two figures are the same. The Monster General Store logo. Now that is really cool. Now I know they're probably saying that because these are custom-made figures, so no single one is going to be the same. But if you collect AHI action figures, none of them are actually the same. There are so many different variants, and that is why I love collecting AHI action figures. And then on the back, we've got this great lurid artwork from the old poster. Let's take a look at our curly-haired Dracula first. Now, Dracula was, of course, played by Zandor Vorkov, as we mentioned. Vorkov would make one more film for Adamson before he gave up acting altogether to continue other pursuits. Now, anyone who knows me knows I have a fear of curly-haired men, and I attribute that to the actor Marjo Gortner, because I saw a TV airing of Earthquake when I was a child, and his character terrified me. And being afraid of curly-haired men in the 70s and 80s was awful, because they were everywhere. Now, that being said, initially I did not like Zandor Vorkov's Dracula, and a great many other people didn't either. His long curly hair and goatee led people to refer to him as Count Zapula, or the Drive-In Dracula. And the makeup they gave him didn't help. The makeup they gave him in the film was something someone would wear if they were dressing up as Dracula to go to a costume party. He wore heavy white cake makeup, dark black circles under his eyes, and they gave him plastic dime store fangs, top and bottom. It was ridiculous. But I suppose that's now what gives the film its charm. Interesting fact, though, is the cape that he wore was supposedly Bela Lugosi's cape from Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, sort of giving his Dracula a connection to the old Universal Monster picks. And as usual, they've done a fantastic job on this. That sculpt is amazing. I mean, check out the eyes. He's got his tuxedo and his bow tie. Skinny jean legs, which is what he kind of was, a skinny Dracula. And his shoes there. And I kind of like the fact that no two figures are going to be the same. Everyone gets a sort of different figure. And two other aspects that people always remember about Vorkov's Dracula is the way he was lit in the film. He's always lit from below, as if he's some scoutmaster sitting around a campfire telling a ghost story. And on top of that, they electronically modulated his voice. So it sounds like he's speaking to us from another world through an echo chamber. It seemed ridiculous at the time, but it's almost as if an 8-year-old kid got enough money to throw Dracula into a slasher film. And that's what kind of makes it cool. Now, as I discussed earlier, Vorkov did get to work with J. Carrol Naish, and he said the guy was kind of grumpy. But of course, Naish at that time was suffering from osteoporosis, and Dracula vs. Frankenstein would, of course, be his last movie. He would die in 1973. Vorkov did not get to meet Chaney because Chaney's scenes were apparently shot about 2 years earlier, and they didn't bring Chaney back for any reshoots. Now, next up, we have our Frankenstein. And Frankenstein was, of course, played by John Bloom. John Bloom, of course, would star that same year in another classic schlock horror movie, The Incredible Two-Headed Transplant. And he would go on to be in numerous movie and television programs, including The Hills Have Eyes 2. Now, his Frankenstein has received flack for being a baked potato style Frankenstein. But I kind of dug it, to be honest with you. What I really love is, and you can't quite see it here, was the leather strap around Frankenstein's head. And he sort of had this swollen, distended face, which honestly looks kind of creepy the way it's shot. And this is a great figure. It's a really bulky figure. They put him on a bulky Frankenstein body. He's got his fists ready to smash J Ackerman. He's got his boots there. Really solid figure and a great sculpt. And a great addition to my Frankenstein collection. Because as you know me, I love Frankenstein. Now there is another action figure connection to the film. And it involves the artist Gray Morrow, who designed one of the posters for the film. Now, years ago at a convention, I had an opportunity to buy this poster, and I passed it up. It was an awesome price, but I had no wall space, and to this day, I regret not buying it. Be that as it may, Gray Morrow was a prolific comic book artist, but he also was the man that designed the artwork on the boxes for the Mego Mad Monster series, one of those being the Monster Frankenstein. Now, the film was a modest success for Adamson and Sherman. I'm sure it made back its money. And over the years, it's gone from being a schlock picture to a cult favorite. And as I grow older, I appreciate the film more and more. Now, as a kid, if I had seen this on a Saturday afternoon, I would have absolutely loved it. And there's something about this film that actually is quite charming. It's fun to watch. It's never honestly really boring just because of the way it's shot. I enjoy the seaside boardwalk setting, the spooky, scary funhouse, and Dracula and Frankenstein are so bizarre, so out there, that you can't help but love them. And I love anything with practical effects and makeup now, because I am so worn out from CGI. And as bad as people have said the Frankenstein monster makeup is in this, there's something about it that is actually quite eerie and creepy. And I guess now that I think of it, I miss that these types of movies just don't get made at all anymore. These were the types of films I gravitated to at the video store. I wish I had the experience to see a lot of these in the drive-in or the movie theater. I saw a few, but I was quite young during the heyday of drive-in pictures. And there was something that was just so cool about the way they would promote and the gimmicks they would come up with to get people to go and see these movies. This would be the last film, of course, for J. Carrol Naish and Lon Chaney Jr. They would both pass away in 1973. And say what you will, they do all they can with the roles that they're given. And poor Chaney, who was suffering from throat cancer at the time and had to play a mute, really does still deliver a bit of pathos and draws upon his character Lenny from Of Mice and Men. Regina Carroll would pass away in 1992 of cancer, and Al Adamson, a few years later, would die in what could be the plot to one of his movies, being murdered by his handyman. Sam Sherman is still alive, and Roger Engel has embraced his role as Zandor Vorkov and now travels the convention circuit, meeting fans. Now, as I stated earlier, these are officially licensed through Independent International Pictures, which is leading me to hope that one day we may see a Regina Carroll figure, a J. Carroll Nash with an accessory wheelchair, a Cheney Groton, a Grasbo, that hippie in the mustard yellow turtleneck. You know what will be awesome? A Dr. Frankenstein's Creature Emporium playset. One can only hope that Monster General Store will fill out the remaining cast of Dracula vs. Frankenstein. And I know it's cliche to say, but it's clear that these are made with love. And while we're going down this road, let me talk a little bit about Brent and Dan Roebuck. I don't know Peter, but I have seen his artwork, and it's Frankenstein related, so I'm pretty sure he's a good guy. Now, if you're a fan of my channel, you know I've been buying Brent's dolls for years, and I've showcased them in multiple episodes. And over that time, Brent and I have become what I consider friends, and we talk from time to time about all things Monster Kid related. Brent himself is a big monster collector, and he has collected stuff over the years, and it led him to start making his own figures, because he wanted to have action figures of the characters he always wanted, from the films he loved so much. Dan Roebuck is a prolific film and TV actor, a celebrity. Now, you think he might be unapproachable, but go on social media and you will see Dan Roebuck in many collectors groups talking to fans, and 9 times out of 10, he is complimenting their artwork or collections. He travels the convention circuit, and from what I hear when you meet him, he is an absolute delight. I myself have not had the privilege of meeting Dan, but I hope to someday at a convention. And while I am a fan of Dan's work on screen, some of my favorite roles I've seen him in are The River's Edge, Dudes, Disorganized Crime, The Fugitive, as well as some of the Rob Zombie pictures. I am more a fan of what a great collector and monster kid he is. He has a massive monster collection, and he showcases it quite a bit. He even created his own horror movie host character, Dr. Shocker, which, as we stated earlier, is now immortalized as an action figure. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that Brent and Dan and any other Monster Kid collector I have run into is always friendly, approachable, and shares in your joy. And that's the thing about Monster Kids. I've been a collector my whole life, from comic books to movies to toys to what have you. But from the very start, I have always been a Monster Kid. And the thing I've noticed about Monster Kid and fellow Monster Kid collectors is that they are always empathetic and compassionate. There is no sense of privilege with Monster Kids. There is no gatekeeping. They don't have factions like other collector groups. They just share in the joy of loving monsters together. And that's what I love about what Dan and Peter and Brent have created here. Clearly, they don't think they're going to make millions of dollars doing Dracula vs. Frankenstein. But they want to share this joy they have for the product with other Monster Kids and make a little money so they can make more stuff. I guess what I'm doing here is kind of reiterating a point that I made in the Famous Monsters episode, when I talked about J Ackerman and how approachable he was and how kind he was to all the kids and people that read Famous Monsters magazine, making them feel like family. There's something special about Monster Kids. I have never met a Monster Kid I didn't like. And I think that goes back to that we were all a little bit of an outcast growing up. And we would sit there late at night on a Friday or on a Saturday afternoon watching monster movies and becoming just a little bit more human. And that'll bring us to the end of another episode of Dr. Durant's Sanctum. If you like this episode, please like and subscribe. And if you like these action figures, please check out the Monster General store. I'll leave a link in the comments below. And speaking of comments, please feel free to leave me some. Now, Halloween is just around the corner, so I'm going to try and bang out a few more costume episodes. Some costume episodes before the big day. So until then, stay cool, stay kind, and walk in beauty, my friends.
emptiness.